I love the video, but in some ways he kind of leaves us hanging, because at the end there, I almost cut the ending off, but I decided not to, because is it as simple as just saying, God, take my baggage? Can you just yell that out and you just feel better? Everything's gone, it all falls to the ground? Is it as simple as that? This morning I want to talk about how we can trade our baggage for his yoke and live the abundant life that Jesus has called us to. Because it's there, and it is possible to let go of our baggage. And we definitely start by calling out to God, but I think there's a little more to it. And so to understand that, I want us to look a little more closely at the passage that he referenced in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. It's a pretty well-known passage. Jesus is speaking, and he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." As I said, crying out to Jesus is the beginning of the process. That's a step you have to have, and he will take it. But to understand how this whole process works, we need to understand our own baggage and the yoke it is that Jesus promised. What is it that he's even offering to us? Because we all have baggage. We all have hurts that we've acquired over the process of our lives. And just like we saw in the video, it's different moments like the moments we just saw. Over the past several months, God has been helping me to understand my own baggage and my own hurts and kind of how I arrived there. When I was a kid, I was pretty small. In fact, I've shared with you this with you before, but I got really sick when I was a baby and it impacted my development. It took me a while to catch back up. And in the 8th grade, I was 5'2", and I was 82 pounds, as I've told you before. But as I've said before, I still had size 12 feet, and I still had hands and arms the same length as what I have right now. I was a gangly looking kid, man. Like, it was pretty rough. You know, a lot of times I'll throw pictures up. I didn't throw that picture up this morning for you. And let me tell you that 7th, 8th, 9th grade, kind of that stretch, is a really difficult time to be small as a human, right? To feel small. I was very concerned about girls and their opinions of me, and I was just being introduced to older girls. Now, guys, how many of you guys remember being introduced to, like, women when you went to high school? Do you remember that? Like those seniors that were there, and you were freshmen, and you were like, whoa, I'm not used to that, right? You remember that? Okay, I'm 5'2", I'm 80 pounds, I'm tiny. In addition to girls, I was very interested in sports. I love sports. And though I was a good athlete, in many ways my size impacted my abilities. You know, I remember being in 8th grade, I'm 5'2", I'm trying to shoot three-pointers, and I'm doing the whole heave from the knees. You guys remember that? Ever do that? Or you're just doing this? I never did that. I could never go there. But hitting softballs, I hadn't got my old man strength yet, so I didn't have big power. I was a singles hitter, I was fast, all that kind of stuff. It impacted my life. Basically, everything I cared about was sports and girls. And it was greatly impacted by my size. When it came to girls, a lot of girls thought I was cute. But little brother cute? Okay? How many of you girls ever told a boy at school he was little brother cute? Like, you just use the phrase, oh, you're so cute. Anybody ever do that? Don't do that. Don't do that, right? Like, we need the girls in here. Jaden, don't tell a boy he's little brother cute, right? And listen, here's the thing. Like, it can be a guy your own age, or it can be a younger guy. Like, don't go to the younger guy and think, oh, you're so cute. Like that, no. We don't want to be little brother cute, right? 7th grade boys don't want to be little brother cute. That's not what they're looking for. Don't tell them, oh, you're going to break hearts someday. Oh, thanks. When's that day? Jerk. I remember seeing these girls. I'd be like, man, those girls are gorgeous. Maybe I got a shot, which I didn't, but junior hires are dumb. But and then, oh, you're so cute. Really? You think I'm cute? Yeah, just like my kid brother. Oh, great. Jerk. Everything that mattered to me, everything I wanted to base my self-worth on, whether it was sports or girls, was a reminder of the fact that I was insufficient. I was just too small to be what I wanted to be. I literally did not measure up, and it hurt. It hurt to feel like I wasn't enough. Of course, I grew. I got taller and rounder, and eventually somebody wanted to be my girlfriend, but the wounds I endured and the baggage I picked up stayed with me. And I joke about this a lot, but in a lot of ways, a lot of times I still feel like that same 13-year-old boy. Like, I'm bigger now, but I still feel like that same kid. Can anybody relate to that? You feel like you're still that same person you were when you picked up that baggage? I believe that the majority of the baggage every person carries is similar to mine in this way. I think the vast majority, if not all the baggage we pick up, comes from the reality that we believe that who we are is not enough. And I believe this started way back in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve are in a perfect garden. God says, don't eat from that tree. Anything else, eat whatever you want. They eat from the tree. And as soon as they eat from the tree, what's the first thing that happens to them? They realize they're naked and they hide. Right? So God shows up and says, hey, where were you guys? And they're like, well, we were naked, so we hid. And God says, who told you were naked? For the first time, okay, why'd they hide? It's because for the first time in recorded history, humanity believed that if God saw, or if a person saw a part of them, they would reject them, right? They felt like there were parts of them that needed to be covered up. If God sees us, and for who we are, if he really sees us, he's going to push us away. He's going to reject us. He's not going to want us. So they hide. Don't we do the exact same thing all the time? Don't we go out of our way to hide the parts of us that we think people won't like, or the parts that people won't reject? Don't we do everything we can to try to present ourselves in a way that we think will be acceptable? I'm convinced that the question they asked then is the question that all of humanity is asking today, and it's, am I enough? Am I lovable? Is who I am enough? And so what do? We try to answer that question, and we want it to be yes, so we strive to succeed in whatever area we think will make us have a sense of value and worth. We chase money, we get surgeries, we wear the right clothes or makeup, we tell the right jokes, whatever we have to do to feel like people will think that who we are is enough. And yet, even in this process, in this pursuit, we experience wounds and pain because we try, right? We put ourselves out there. I'm going to do the thing that I think people will like, and because so much is hanging on that, somebody rejects us, tells us even your best effort isn't enough, and so the hurt is even greater, isn't it? We collect baggage. Well, why is this? Well, it's because the real problem is not something that can be fixed with financial success or relationship success or charitable works, the right look, or any of those other things that we try. The problem is that we are aware of the truth that we actually don't measure up. And we never will. Because the real problem is sin. To understand this whole concept, you really need to understand who Jesus was talking to. Who was Jesus talking to at this point in time in Matthew 11? He's talking to a group of Jews. A group of Jews who lived under the religious leadership of what group of people? The Pharisees, right? So that's the guys that they hung out with, these Pharisees. And so these people were living under the law. That was their religious system. How did that get lived out? Well, we talked about, Jesus says, take my yoke. Well, what's a yoke? Was Jesus doing, like Atkins or something? He couldn't eat egg yolks. He just had to have whites. He's like, here, take my yoke, and I'll just eat the egg whites. Is that what was going on? What's a yoke? That was a terrible dad joke, huh, Drew? She's embarrassed. All right. What's a yoke? It was a wooden piece of wood. It was a wooden piece of wood. It was rare. And they would use that to connect two oxen to each other to do plowing in the field, right? But in religious terms, when we talk about a yoke, there were rabbis in the first century, and they would have a yoke. It was basically their teaching. And so you would take on the yoke of your rabbi. You would say, I'm going to take on that yoke. I'm going to see things the way you see them, do things the way you do them. I'm going to experience my faith the way you've instructed me to experience my faith. So what yoke were the people Jesus was talking to carrying at that point in time? It was the yoke of the Pharisees. Which was what? It was an incredibly religious yoke. It was a way of doing things that was based 100% around rules. In fact, the Pharisees had over 600 regulations regarding what qualified as working on the Sabbath. In addition to all the other rules, 600 rules about what was or was not work on the Sabbath alone. 600. That's a lot of rules, isn't it? So this is the group of people that Jesus is talking to. People who are weighed down by the law. Look at what Paul tells us in Romans 3 about that law. Verse 20. He says, therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. So here was the yoke that was being given to people. You need to follow all these rules, including the 600 on how to do working on the Sabbath, to be accepted by God. This is what the Pharisees were teaching people. But Paul just said to us, no one will ever measure up to the law. And in fact, not only will you not measure up, but if you try to live the law, all it does is make you aware of the fact that you can't fulfill the law. So Jesus is talking to a group of people who spent their whole life trying to measure up, trying to live up to a standard, and he's going, you're probably pretty tired, aren't you? You're probably heavy burdened and overwhelmed by this incredible yoke, this constant reminder that who you are is not enough. Today, you may or may not carry the same yoke. You may very well be a legalist, someone who's constantly trying to follow the rules in order to be deemed acceptable to God. In fact, I think a lot of people think that's what this is all about, is that we're supposed to follow the rules in order to be acceptable to God. But my guess is that even if you don't live this out in a religious context, many of you still struggle to try and prove that who you are is good enough. That's why it hurts when a friend betrays us, a father abandons us, a girl rejects us. You may be able to understand in your mind that other people have wounds and that's why they do the things they do. But as we heard in the video, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will break my heart. Like we experience these hurts, even though we can mentally say, okay, I know that's their problem, not mine. It's really hard to convince your heart that, isn't it? It's really hard to get to a place where you genuinely believe that more than just give intellectual assent. So what's the answer? Well, this is that yoke Jesus said he would trade, the yoke he would give to us. He promises us something different, a yoke that's easy and a burden that's light. Paul continues in Romans 3:21 through 24. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given, okay? This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. Break that down. What's the yoke that's being offered? Righteousness is given freely through faith in Jesus Christ to who? Everyone who believes. And there's that word, I love it. I told you I'd say it a million times. We've all sinned. Okay, everybody in the room has sinned, but we are justified by his grace. Just as if I'd never sinned. That's how we're made. We're made to be enough. God says you are good enough. I had an interesting conversation with a young woman this week. Her life was falling apart around her. I got a text message. I don't know where to turn. My life's a mess. She came in, she met with me, we were talking. And I said, hey, what's going on? She walked me through the story. Things were not real good. And basically, it was this message, right? That she was carrying this baggage of never being able to measure up. And I looked at her and said, what do you know about Jesus? What do you know about all this church stuff? She says, nothing. She said, I know Jesus died for us, but I have no idea what that even means. I said, well, can I tell you? She said, yeah. Absolutely. So I walked her through this process. And here's what I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to hear that it is Jesus that she needs. But here's what she kept hearing. that what she needed was church. How many people think that what you need is church in our world? Right? I laid the whole thing out for her about how she didn't see herself as having value. She didn't understand her worth. She's carrying the baggage. I said, do you know what the answer is? And she says, I need to come to church. Now, don't get me wrong. Church is good. You should absolutely come to church. But church isn't the answer. What's the answer? Jesus is the answer. Guess what? If you make church the answer, all you're doing is living by the law. Church isn't the answer. But there's all kinds of people that want you to believe that want to just throw this yoke of the Pharisees back on you. They only say, well, if you want to be right with God, you want to get saved? Well, you better be at church at least 7 out of 10 Sundays. Well, no, vacations don't count. That's one of your 3 that you didn't make it. You were sick? Well, sorry, you're out, right? And we might not ever word it that way, but don't people kind of word it that way sometimes? Oh, do you say cuss words? Well, you can't say the bad ones. You can say the Christian-y cuss words, but only a little bit. If you say them too much, you're out, right? Because we don't know there's Christian-y cuss words, right? Like you can say some things. You thought I was going to say one of them, didn't you? If we weren't videotaping, I might. Like we get this idea that, we're right back to the law. That's not what this says. Look at the yoke Jesus offers to us. He says the righteousness of God is given through faith in Jesus Christ. Not through going to church, not through jumping through the hoops, not through making sure you don't work on the Sabbath with Rule 559, that you are justified freely by the grace of God. You are declared good enough. That's the yoke Jesus is offering. So he's looking at a group of people. They're a mess. They're heavy laden. They're burdened by all this stuff. And he looks at them and says, guys, do you want my yoke? It's easy. And the burden is light. Do you want to put it down, all this mess? That's what God is offering to us. He's offering us his grace. He's saying you don't have to be enough because Jesus is enough. And we get to be seen as perfect in God's sight. Which would be blasphemous if it wasn't God's idea. But I don't know about you guys. I struggle with this. Not for you. Here's one of the things that's fascinating. You bring in the most heinous, rotten, terrible sinner you've ever met, and God's grace, I will offer it without any hesitation. Because I believe with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength that God's grace is for everyone except me. Anybody else struggle with that? How many of you guys can look at everybody in the world and say, of course God loves you. Oh, you did that bad thing and that bad thing and that bad. God still loves you. God still loves you. We'll tell stories about David, who was a murderer, adulterer. I mean, we're like, hey, of course God's grace is sufficient for you. But it's really hard to receive God's grace for ourselves, isn't it? We look at ourselves and go, we should be doing better. How many of you guys as Christians have ever said the thing to yourself, I should know better by now? This is inexcusable. Why is this? Well, I think this is the part I really want you to understand. And I think it's the part that he left out of the video. Because we absolutely start by crying out to Jesus. This is step one. God, take my baggage. I don't want this anymore. I need you to take it. Just get it away from me, okay? But you have to understand everything that Jesus said. He gives us incredibly important insight when he offers to trade yokes. You see, he didn't just say, take this yoke. He said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. You see, when people took the yoke of a rabbi, they followed that rabbi. They would walk around with the rabbi and he would teach them what to do. And they would learn and they would grow and they would wrestle and grapple with these ideas and they would apply them. And there was this in and out and struggling to do the things they'd been told to do by their rabbi. Look at the disciples of Jesus. They spend 3 years with the guy, and the night Jesus goes to the cross, they're scattered. Peter's denying ever knowing him. They're hiding. I mean, these guys are a mess. Jesus didn't just show up and go download all the information, you guys are perfect. He invited them into a process. He invited them to take on the yoke and learn from him. Guess what Jesus is inviting you to? To take on his yoke and learn from him. And that is a process. We don't just change overnight. I don't know about you, but I'm still learning to trust that what he says is true. I'm still learning to believe that I'm enough. I'm still wrestling with these ideas that he could really forgive my sin, that he could forgive me not just for the things I did then, but for the things I do now, even as a pastor who's supposed to have it all together. I'm wrestling with that. Not because I don't believe it's true, but because I'm in a process, just like you guys. Am I further along on the journey than I was before? Absolutely. Do I still have a long ways to go? Absolutely. But we do it together, don't we? And that's what he's called us to. So when you see this video and he takes the baggage, and if you're here today and you've got this baggage, can you cry out to Jesus? Yes. But don't stop with just taking his yoke. Learn from him. Why do we do church, guys? Is it so that you'll be saved? No. We do church so we can learn from him together. We do church because we want to take his yoke and learn from each other. We want to experience Christ together and grow in him and begin to trust and believe that what he says is true, not just for everybody else, but for us with ever increasing measure. It's a process. It's how God does pretty much everything is process. A process of transformation, of taking a yoke that says, look, you're already enough. Do you know that's the thing that sets Christianity apart? This is what I want to leave you with this morning. Do you know every other major world religion, the whole purpose of the religion is jump through these hoops and you'll be enough for God. Christianity is the one religion that says you're already enough for God because of the person of Jesus Christ. You're already saved. You don't have to jump through all the hoops to get saved. So we start in the position of God looking at you and saying, you are enough just the way you are. I accept you. I want you. I died for you. I will never reject you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will never, ever leave you in that position. You stand, not condemned, but saved. And then we learn how to actually live it out throughout the rest of our lives. Isn't that a good deal? That sound like an easier yoke? Sure does to me. Let's pray.